Joining us. It's nice to see you all here. And friends, if you're tuning in at home or tuning in from Waterford Place, we're also so glad that you're watching. You all know that some of the best and most interesting speakers that come here to Friendship Village come because one of you has a special relationship with them. Don Trotier actually had a considerable role in organizing today's presentation with Bill Hosket. And so I'm going to turn it over to Don to do an introduction.
Okay, for some of you who were not here the last time Bill spoke, let me give you a little background about Bill's accomplishments. Bill won a high school state championship in the state of Ohio. He was the most valuable player. He won a Big Ten championship. He was the most valuable player. He was the most valuable player in the Midwest. He then went on and won a gold medal in the Olympics. And to top it off, he played with the New York Knicks when they won an NBA championship. So he has quite a background. He is I would say, he's been as successful in his business career as he has in his basketball. We have, a number of you have given me some ideas what you'd like to hear him talk about. I've passed them on to Bill, and I think you can feel free to bombard him with any kind of questions that you might have concerning basketball. I would say there's a little known fact in this room that 35 years ago, I was on a team with Bill and playing in a basketball tournament. So Bill, take it away.
Thank you. Boy, this is special here now. I could see most of you before I got up here, being a little taller than some, and I hope this is legal if I take this off. Yes, absolutely. And I notice everyone in here is observing the distance requirements unless they're married or dating like the Pierces are back here. So it's nice to be here again with you and to visit with you a little bit and talk some basketball, if nothing else. And of course, Don had to bring up the Rotary basketball tournament that we played in. It was at least 35 years ago. And Don, I don't want to say that you weren't a great point guard, but there's peaks and valleys to every career. As the fact that I was in the Rotary tournament, I thought it was going to be just a bunch of old Rotarians that just wanted to get out and play for some exercise. And we went up to Otterbein College, and teams from all over Central Ohio showed up to play in this tournament. And I hadn't touched a ball in 6 or 7 months. And, you know, our team was, I think we had 6 or 7 guys. 2 of them still had their wristwatches on, so I was a little concerned that this wasn't going to go real well for us. And we won the first game, and they said, well, you're in the second round now. I said, I thought we were just playing for fun. No, it's a tournament, and we won the second game, and then we ended up in a championship game. And they had a young guy in Westerville from the Westerville Rotary that they had just come in to run the Boy Scouts in Westerville, and he was 6 feet 11 inches tall and about 28 years old. And I told my teammates, I could help up until this point, but this time you guys are on your own. I got more than I can handle right here with this young guy. We were all too old to be there, and daggone it, we didn't win the championship. You didn't tell them that part, but we got close. So we had a good day. So. But Don obviously played, he coached, he's followed the game forever. And we talk constantly at Rotary about what's right or what's wrong with Ohio State because like all of us, we had a chance to play at some time. And everybody's career ends at a different path. Some guys never make it beyond junior high or grade school. Some, their last year they ever play is their senior in high school. Some of us were lucky to play in college, and as Don mentioned, my senior year was an Olympic year, so I had a chance to play in the Olympics, and that was a heck of a lot of fun down in Mexico City, and we were fortunate enough to win. And then I went straight there to New York and played with the Knicks, which was another great experience. And those teams didn't win because of me. You might have been a star player in high school or college, but on the Olympics I started, but Spencer Haywood and JoJo White were Charlie Scott, they were the stars of our team. And we played for Henry Iba, who really played a team game, and it was fun. And we were fortunate enough to win. And that's a whole different experience from anything you ever do. I went to the Olympic trials. They were in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was 21 years old. And it was interesting because they said, the team will train in Honolulu. The Olympics are going to get ready for the Olympic Games in 6 weeks in Honolulu. And I thought, Haas, you got to make this team. 6 weeks in Hawaii? Are you kidding me? So you play hard anyway, and you're trying to make a team, and was chosen. And, you know, I'm older than the internet and everything else, but when I got back to Dayton, Ohio, where I'm from, I got a telegram. In those eras, there was no internet, there was no email. And I got a telegram that said, everybody will fly to Denver, the entire Olympic contingent, all sports, and get outfitted for the Olympic Games, where they gave you clothing, your parade outfit, luggage, all types of things, equipment-wise. And then we will fly the next day from Denver to Honolulu, with the exception of men's basketball, which has been moved to Adams State Teachers College in Alamosa, Colorado. So I spent 6 weeks in Alamosa, and Adams State was, I think the population of Alamosa at the time was 7,200, and the altitude was 7,500. And that was the reason, because we were going to play in Mexico City, where the altitude was up there. So Coach Iba moved the basketball team, and instead of seeing the beaches in Waikiki for the next 6 weeks, I saw a dorm, a cafeteria, and a gym. But that's exactly what we needed, because he took a group of guys that all thought they were good players and had to mold us into a team within 6 weeks. And he did just that. And it was interesting because at that time, pros were not allowed to play in the Olympic Games. So it was all amateurs. And when we got to the Olympics, it was a tough go, because we were 21, 22. Spencer Haywood was actually 19 years old. He'd played 1 year of junior college basketball and made the Olympic team. And I watched Henry Iba turn him into a basketball player in 6 weeks in Alamosa. It was really neat to watch, but it was also very helpful. He's the reason we won the gold medal. And he was phenomenal in the games down there. But when you're going as college players, which we were at 21, 22, 19 years old, you're playing against guys that are in their 30s. It was like the other countries' professional teams. And United States had never lost a game in the Olympics, so it was important that we won. And it's the only sport in the Olympics that's native to the United States. All the other sports came from other countries, but basketball was ours, and we'd never lost a game. And we were fortunate enough to win again that year. And then in '72, the Russians took it out of bounds till they won. And, you know, the games in Munich were known for a lot more than the basketball team just getting beat. They had the tragedy with the Israeli team. And the Olympics, like everything else, then they've become more and more political as time has moved on, and more of a business as time has moved on. We're getting ready now to go to China, and we'll see how that works. I served 3 terms on the Olympic Basketball Committee, representing former players after I was not eligible to play anymore. When I became a professional with the Knicks, you couldn't, obviously, no pros went to the Olympics in that era. But I did serve on the committee, and the first taste of politics I really got into it was I was on the 72 committee of the 76 committee, and we were getting ready for the 1980 games, and that's when President Carter said we're not going to Moscow, and so we didn't get a chance to go. But so that world has changed a great deal, as has collegiate athletics, which we'll probably talk a little bit more about here today. And for the guys that were at Probus the other day, they can tune me out or leave if they want, because we talked a little bit about this last week when I spoke there. But the Ohio State collegiate world has changed a great deal, as most of you are aware. I played in an era where freshmen weren't eligible, and no matter how good a high school player you were or what your reputation was, you spent a year just going to class and learning where the buildings were on Ohio State University and going to practice every day. Freshmen weren't eligible to play. You didn't play until you were a sophomore. So we played 3 years of varsity basketball when we were in college. This day and age, freshmen are eligible. They have the one and done rule, where if you're really gifted, you can leave after your freshman year and go play professional basketball. That was not eligible when, wasn't possible when we played. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have social media. We didn't have name, image, and likeness that they have today. We didn't have the transfer portal. Once you committed to a school, you went to that school, unless you flunked out, and then you could reappear somewhere else maybe a year later. You had to sit out a year. So all the rules have changed a great deal. The basketball rules have changed a little bit in the fact that they added the three-point shot, and everybody thought that was major when it took place. Probably the way some people felt way back when they did away with the center jump after every basket. When my father played for Ohio State and played in high school, after every made basket, they went to half court and had a center jump. That changed, and we look at that rule now. When I was playing, even in the 60s and 70s, like, are you kidding me? They jumped it up after every basket. But I was with an eye doctor the other day, and he was telling me, he said, Mr. Hosket, my dad said you were a pretty good shooter. I bet you wished you had that three-point rule. And I said, yeah, it would have been nice to have a shot that you could take from outside a certain arc and it counted more. But I said, the one thing we were fortunate, we only had 2 officials, not 3. And he looked at me and said, what? And it really made me feel kind of old, to tell you the truth, because even in junior high, when he grew up playing basketball, the doctor I was visiting, he was a pretty good high school player, but he had no idea that we ever had just 2 referees doing a game. That there'd been 3 ever since he did it. So, but I don't have a problem realizing how old I'm getting. I mean, it happens obviously to all of us, but my youngest grandson, Brad, we have 3 sons, and my youngest grandson is Graham. He's 7 years old, and we were down the country at our place in Bainbridge, Ohio on Thanksgiving, and he jumped up in my lap, and he was talking to me, and he looked up at me, and he said, hey, Pawpaw, what color did your hair used to be? So kids will always let you know, but it's not necessarily kids. Not too long ago, I got my driver's license renewed, and I'm in line, and I go up, and this lady was obviously stressed out because those people just work and type all day and listen to the same questions, and you hope you brought the right information and all that good stuff. And she's handling it all, and she goes, address. I said, Bayford Court, still the same. She said, fine. She said, eyes. I said, blue. She just typed it down. She said, hair. I said, blonde. She looked up and went, whatever, and just kept on typing. So she wasn't buying it either. So we all have to get used to change. I mean, obviously, our sport's changed a lot with some of the things I mentioned, but I get concerned about it primarily from a coach's perspective of the things they have to deal with that our coaches didn't. And we talked about Fred Taylor at lunch today, and what a great man he was and a terrific coach. But I just can't imagine, we were in college when Fred was the basketball coach, Marty Carreau was the baseball coach, Woody Hayes was the football coach, Larry Snyder was the track coach. These were all gold watch candidates. These were all Hall of Famers at Ohio State coaching these various teams. And I just can't imagine any of those people putting up with name, image, and likeness and saying that the players can now get paid or go run downtown and do an ad or be in a car ad or start selling their autographs or going to a session where people are paying money to see them. And it's a change. And not that I'm against kids doing as well as they can do. I mean, our world has changed. I think Woody Hayes, maybe his top pay was in the upper 40s. Fred Taylor's top pay at Ohio State might have been $34,000, something in that nature. Today, these college coaches wouldn't do an ad for that amount of money. I mean, we've taken it to the business model to where the coaches get millions to coach their teams. And I'm not saying it's wrong if it's available, and if your son or daughter were coaching and had that available to them, you'd tell them to do it. It's the same as one and done. Are you going to leave college after 1 year to go play professionally? And if kids had that opportunity, you'd say, well, if it's a so-so job, no. But if it's a chance to make millions, you almost have to give them the advice to go. And it's tough. I mean, but that's the world we live in now. That's what they've been presented with. So it's very different than what it was. But the thing I worry about from a coach's perspective, if one player is, we all know certain players are better than other players, and everything you do is public, and it's in the paper the next day. And how many did you score? How many turnovers did you have? What did you do from the free throw line? How many rebounds did you have? Did you win? Did you lose? Everybody knows what every kid does in this day and age because it's public knowledge. It's publicized. And that's part of athletics. That's part of competing, and you lay it out there on the line when you choose to play a sport, especially at a high-profile school like Ohio State, that you're going to get a lot of notoriety, but you're also going to get a certain amount of pressure because people expect certain things out of you when you play at this school. And that's not all wrong. I mean, I love the competitive nature of it. That was fine. But I'm thinking from a coach's perspective, if you had to coach a bunch of kids and one kid's making enough money that he gets a new car or a new truck and another kid is not participating in that, how does that affect your team chemistry? How does that affect your ability to coach kids, make them get along? Because that's a lot to handle when you're 17, 18, 19 years old, when one guy's getting paid and maybe another guy's getting nothing. And I worry about it from a perspective of revenue sports versus non-revenue sports. There's no way that a swimmer or diver at Ohio State doesn't work just as hard as a basketball player or a football player. But because our sports, the revenue sports, have more television opportunity, there's more opportunity to make money on name, image, and likeness. And I wonder how that's going to sit long term. And I wonder, because this has really just begun, and I wonder how it's going to work from Title IX, from women's sports to men's sports, on how that's going to be viewed if certain kids are making money and other kids aren't. And they're all on scholarship. As of now, a kid could go out and make $500,000 doing ads, and Ohio State would still be paying his room and board and tuition, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense in that era. But that's the way it is right now. And we'll see where all this goes down the road and how bad it can get. And it'll be horrible from a recruiting standpoint because certain schools will be able to have more marketing opportunities than others. And the Power Five conferences will all figure it out. They'll figure out how to channel the money to the right kids and get the right ads, and all the things that we considered for years that were outside the lines or cheating or an illegal benefit will now become legal. And I don't know how coaches are going to handle that. The ones I talk to are having a lot of difficulty with the transfer portal alone. And whether you're aware or not, but a kid can decide to leave school at any time. He can, argue with a coach. He can not like the way they're practicing. He can be upset with his playing time, and he can put his name in the transfer portal and leave. And a lot of coaches now are no longer recruiting high school players. They're just going to recruit the transfer portal. So the world has really changed, and it's very, very different. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong at this point. If you come from my vantage point and my vintage, you'd say a lot of these things are not going to work out very well, because anytime you get everything based on money, it can be difficult. And I mentioned it the other day with the Probus group, but Mel Tucker was a football coach up at Michigan State, and he coached, his last stop before he came to Michigan State was Colorado. And he turned a program around so they were over 500. It wasn't like they were making bowl games every year, but he turned a program that was suffering into, maybe they had a 6-5 season or a 7-5 season. And he went to Michigan State last year, and they were better, but they weren't great. And this year they were ranked in the top 10 and won their first 7 or 8 games. And the school got very excited. Some other jobs opened up in the country, and a couple of alums stepped forward and offered this guy a 10-year deal for $95 million. And he hadn't won the Big Ten yet. He hadn't beaten all the right schools. The day after they announced the offer, he came to Columbus and got beat 49-6. So, but now you're paying a guy $95 million to coach football for 10 years. And what do you think that does to all the other coaches in the league that happen to be winning? I mean, what does Ryan Day tell Gene Smith after that? Or what does Tom Izzo, the basketball coach who's won the Big Ten repeatedly, run the Big Ten tournament, and has won the NCAA tournament, how does he feel when this guy hadn't even won the league yet, coaching their football team, and has that kind of an offer in front of him? So from a business perspective, it's almost out of hand. And the kids with the transfer portal are almost becoming free agents. The kid that came here from Texas, the quarterback that signed here a year ago, Texas had not yet changed the name, image, and likeness rule. Their state hadn't accepted it. So he could not be paid for any ads that he did or anything like that. Ohio had changed the law, and so he came to Ohio State to be quarterback. And he took 2 snaps this year. He made hundreds of thousands of dollars with some ads and some marketing things they did. But the company also told him that if he wanted to continue his deal, he had to play in 40% of the plays next year. And Ohio State wouldn't guarantee that. They have Stroud coming back, who had that great Rose Bowl and had a great year. They're not going to guarantee a guy playing time anyway here. They don't have to. They never have. They never will. And so they said, we can't guarantee that. So he transferred back to Texas because that state had now changed the rule. So he can go back to his home state and make money. But so really he came to Ohio State for a single season only because of money. And he's leaving because of money. And that's not the way it should be. All the things we talk about, one and done, we talk about the transfer portal, we talk about name, image, and likeness, but we never talk about education anymore. And these are schools and universities. So no one is talking about what are they majoring in, or do those credits transfer, or what's happening. And we're all guilty of it. You watch the games and we look at the score. I go to the games hoping we win. If it says Ohio State on their jersey, I want them to win. And I don't think about all those things that are going on behind the scenes that maybe a coach is dealing with, or a series of coaches are dealing with. So it's just, I'm not, at this point, I can't say it's right or wrong. I'm not jealous because of it. I was appreciative of the education that we got. I played for a guy, we were talking about this at lunch today. Fred Taylor had 102 players letter for him while he coached at Ohio State. 97 of them graduated. Today, I don't know if kids graduate at that rate anymore when they're thinking about leaving, or, but to his credit, at our insurance agency, we recently hired a little-known guy named Andy Katzenmoyer, who was a great linebacker at Ohio State. And Andy, 2 weeks ago Sunday, graduated from Ohio State. And he entered school with my youngest son, Brad, who's 44. But he left early to go play pro football, and education kind of got away from him. And he said, it's one thing my parents always wanted me to do. It's one thing I wanted to do. So he went back and got his degree. So I'm proud of him for that fact. But, there's a lot of articles written about Andy Katzenmoyer now has his college degree. That used to be the norm. Now it was something that was exceptional because a guy that had made money and left, played pro football, got injured, decided to go ahead and get into graduate. So it's just a change, like everything else we've all gone through. It's rearranged, it's changed, it's different. We'll find out if it's right or wrong, but I think you're going to see a lot of coaches decide this isn't for me anymore. I think it's getting to be too much like a business. I know Roy Williams at North Carolina got out because he saw these changes coming. We've seen some other coaches retire recently. Mike Krzyzewski's retiring at the end of this year. I don't think this was part of it, but I think he was tired of the one and done and the fact that coaches and schools can make ungodly amounts of money from athletics, and the kids were still amateurs and not getting paid. But where you fear this could go is, are the kids almost becoming employees? And, I look down the road and say, will somebody unionize these kids? Will there be a players association? Will it get to that point? We hope not, but you just never know. So the one thing I know Ohio State is doing, since they have name, image, and likeness, they now have business sessions with the kids that are getting it, because they have to understand that when you go out and get $1,000 for doing something, that Uncle Sam is watching you, and you have to pay taxes on that. So, and many are from families that had no awareness whatsoever of anything to do with the government or taxes, or you're thrusting them into a world they haven't been in. Most of them didn't even face that till they got into professional basketball. I played on the Knicks with a guy that was a former Rhodes Scholar. He went to Princeton, Bill Bradley, and he actually ran for the nomination for president from the Democratic Party. Full disclosure, we're not of the same party, but I would have voted for Bill Bradley. I mean, he's a phenomenal leader and a great person. But I remember I signed with the Knicks, and the Olympics were in the fall, so they'd already played 5 regular season games. And I came to New York, met my teammates in the locker room. They had a game that night. And in fact, we went out and warmed up, and Red Holzman, our coach, said, Bill, you're not going to play tonight, but you're straight from the Olympics. They're going to have a little introduction for you. I said, okay, I can handle that. So got through warm-ups all right, and they announced the starters, had a little special introduction for me to get ready to start the game, so I went over to sit on the bench. And Walt Frazier was sitting on my right. He wasn't starting for the Knicks at that time. He was College Player of the Year. Bill Bradley was sitting on my left. He was College Player of the Year a different year. That's when I realized this is probably a pretty good team I ended up on. Hosh, you're going to have to do a little work here. You're not going to play at all. But it turned out to be a great experience and a great group of guys. But we had a road trip like 2 days later, and Bill Bradley, we didn't have private planes back then or charters. We flew commercially. And Bill Bradley sat across from me, and he just wanted to talk with me because he had played on the 64 Olympic team, and I played on the 68 team. We had the same coach. So we were comparing notes, and I'll never forget, he looked at me, he says, what are your thoughts about a flat tax? And I said, pardon? He said, a flat tax, flat income tax. Well, I had signed my contract 2 days before then. I didn't even have a paycheck yet. But this guy, I'm 21 or 22, he's 24. He's talking to me about a flat tax. He said, it comes out the same. If everybody had to pay 15% and with no deductions, it would turn out to be almost the same amount as what they're collecting today with all these issues. And just think about it. He said, the smartest people in our country are accountants and tax attorneys that spend the majority of their time trying to figure out how not to pay the government. He said, if we all had to pay the same, those guys would have to do something else. They'd have very productive lives. I went, this guy's in another world. So, but it was interesting. He was that type of guy, and he was that bright. And of course, we had various teammates. Willis Reed was our captain and great guy, and DeBuscher was on that team. And then eventually Frazier got in the lineup, Bradley got in the lineup. And we had a guy on our team that was just totally unique and very strange acting to me when I first met him. And he wore T-shirts and sport coats before they were in. And his hair was a little too long, and he was a hippie, but playing for the New York Knicks. And you know, you've all gone back to high school or college reunions over the years, and you always run into somebody and say, you believe that guy's successful? Or do you believe she turned out that well? I mean, you're just shocked at how some people mature later, they change. Well, the guy I'm talking about is Phil Jackson. And he ended up winning more championships than anybody else. I mean, he coached, Michael Jordan became his best friend when he coached the Chicago Bulls, and then he had Kobe Bryant and Shaquille when he was in Los Angeles. And Phil played on 2 championships in New York and coached like 9 others. So he ended up with 11 championship rings, and I thought the guy was confused most of the time that I knew him, and he was. You know, I read about Woodstock. He went to Woodstock. I mean, this is the type of guy he was. And I listened to country music, and he followed the Grateful Dead, and he's still following what's left of them, I think, today. So you just never know, but you meet a lot of interesting characters if you play athletics long enough, and he was definitely one of them. But I was blessed to be part of really good teams under really good coaches, and I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything. And hopefully the kids today are going to have the same experiences. The beauty of it is we didn't know the difference when we were playing. They don't know the difference today. Kids are very adaptable. And so name, image, and likeness, one and done, transfer portal, that probably all seems normal to them. It's just the older guys that look back and say, boy, how do you put up with all that? But I do worry about the coaches having to put up with it because it's a different situation. So kind of hit and missed a little thing here. I'm sure there's some questions in the room. If I could throw it open to questions, be more than happy to answer a few. Yes, sir.
You think you'll ever raise the net for the rim?
No, I don't think so. Probably be too costly. But it's the same as a 24-second clock. You know, we have a 30-second clock in college, 24-second in the pros. You have to shoot it and people have talked about putting it in for high school. And I think it'll eventually happen, but right now it's probably a cost issue. And one more thing for somebody to run at the scores table, you'd have to operate the clock. So we'll continue to see changes, but there's no question the players are bigger and faster than they've ever been. And, you know, I look at this year's Ohio State team, and, you know, here's another variable that obviously you're sitting in a room all with masks on. We never had to put up with COVID either. Of course, no one has ever put up with COVID. And these college kids putting up with COVID right now, Ohio State played like December the 11th and had finals week, and they weren't supposed to play. They were playing Kentucky on the 18th out in Las Vegas. And some of the kids came down with COVID, and the rules were if you went to Las Vegas and you came down with COVID, you couldn't come back to Ohio. You had to stay in Las Vegas for 10 days. And Coach Holtman was saying, hey, we can't afford to lose kids for 10 days. We're going to cancel the game. So they did, and then we postponed and canceled the next 2 games. And then they had the Christmas break and then canceled a game afterward. And these kids really didn't play or practice for 3 weeks right in the middle of their season. So they were playing pretty well right before the break. You know, they lost a couple close games, but they won a couple close games, and they were getting better. And then they beat Duke, and they beat Wisconsin. They were playing well. And then the COVID break hit, and Ohio State is like starting all over. But it's not like every other school's not going through the same thing. So it's hard to predict what's going to happen in the league this year, who's going to win it, who's going to lose it, because you don't know really who's going to be playing and how well they're going to play. Last year, Michigan missed 3 or 4 games, and had a better winning percentage than Illinois, but Illinois played their full schedule. Illinois felt they should have been the Big Ten champions, but it was awarded to Michigan based on their winning percentage. So those things would have never happened pre-COVID. These are just different things that people are having to deal with continually. Yes, sir.
Speaking of those, how about Purdue and Wisconsin and Illinois as far as the Big Ten?
They're good. They're all three very good. And we beat Wisconsin here in Columbus handily. They put it on us when we went out there a week or so ago, and we played horribly. It looked like we were stuck in concrete or something. But they played very well, and they're extremely well coached. Illinois has a guy in the middle, this Kofi Cockburn or whatever the guy's name is, but he's like 7 feet tall and weighs 275 or 280 pounds. He's a real man. I mean, we don't have anybody to contend with him, and they have good guards, and they're well coached, very tough to beat at their place, like a lot of Big Ten schools are. And Purdue has a big kid, Travion Williams, starts for him in the center, and he's like 6'9" and weighs 270, 265. He's a big, strong kid. And the guy that comes in for him is 7'4". So, and they have a great guard in Ivy. So they really have a talented team. And I thought after watching them in November, December, good luck for anybody beating Purdue. And they've lost 2 league games already. They got upset at Rutgers, and Wisconsin beat them in West Lafayette, which is really hard to do. So I would say it's Illinois and Purdue are the two I think that will probably prevail as we go through the season if things stay semi-normal, which they probably won't. But Illinois hasn't missed any games yet. I mentioned this last week, and we also talked about it at lunch. We just had the college football playoffs, and Luke Fickle's a friend of ours, and when he coached here, and his brother-in-law is Bob Hoying of Crawford Hoying. They married sisters, and so the families are very close. But he was talking to Luke, and I guess they had a protocol meeting before the Final Four of football with all the 4 coaches and some administrators, and talking about various events they were going to attend and how it was going to be handled and what happens if. And Luke asked, what happens if we have a major COVID outbreak? And Saban from Alabama said, it won't happen. He said, well, what do you mean it won't happen? He said, we don't test. And Georgia said, we don't either. So Luke said, what are we supposed to do? We're outmanned, we're the underdog to begin with, and if I miss 2 or 3 kids because of COVID, so I don't know if I want our guys to test either. So, and then I went to an Ohio State game a week ago Sunday, or 2 weeks ago, I guess it was now, and we played well and won, but we were sitting in the Schottenstein Center. Concessions were closed. We all had to wear masks the whole game. If you even took your mask down to talk to somebody, somebody got after you. And they had people walking around with signs, wear your mask, don't take it down. So it was a different feeling when you're going to a ball game and can't get a Coke or a hot dog, and then sitting there with mask on. And the next night was the football championship game, indoors in Indianapolis, and I didn't see anybody wearing masks, sold out. Georgia and Alabama, cheerleaders, bands, the whole 9 yards. So it just depends, I guess, where you are and what the rules are and how you administer those rules. But it's very different, and it's hard to read right now on which way we're going to go. Somebody else. Yes, sir.
How do these young athletes, where do they get advice on making financial decisions and what they do?
Well, I think Ohio State's athletic department is bringing some people in to talk to them. They're having some sessions on it, on tax concerns and what you can do and what you can't do and how far you can go. But I mean, think of the disruption we had a few years ago when kids traded memorabilia for tattoos, which was nuts. And everybody said they didn't know anything about it. Well, if your players are showing up with tattoos, believe me, you had a clue what was going on. And especially if you have 29 people involved in the football staff right now. That's a big group of people not to know what your kids are doing, but they're still college kids. It's hard to watch them all the time. But about everything those kids did today would be legal. Over that, we lost Trestle, we had probation, we had all kind of issues. So the rules have changed. So they're bringing people in to give the kids advice, but how well it's going to be heeded, we'll find out. You know, I've known an awful lot of I don't know them personally, but of a lot of pro athletes that have signed huge contracts and 3 years later they're bankrupt. And it's almost hard to believe how you could spend that much money or lose that much money, but it depends who's getting a hold of it and how much you think you forget Uncle Sam's out there and how much he gets. And so they need a lot of advice when you're starting to handle money, especially at a young age, and especially when everybody else wants a part of it. So,
Bill,
yeah.
talk about what we're going to lose this year off this team and what we have coming in next year.
The
Okay.
question was, talk about what we're going to lose this year off of this team and what is going to be coming in next year.
Well, we have a great recruiting class come. I've heard. I haven't seen them play, so I always kind of like to wait and see. But it's a top 10 class in the country. He's very proud of the kids he's got coming. And the one thing about Chris Holtman, he won't bring somebody in he doesn't think belongs. I mean, he cares about their character. He likes to meet their families, visit with them, get to know what kind of kids he's bringing in, because he worries about that chemistry that I've been talking about, which is good. But this year, we're going to lose a bunch. I mean, Kyle Young got an extra year because of COVID, and he will be gone. Liddell will be gone. Wheeler transferred here from Penn State. He got an extra year. He will be gone. Arns will be gone. Justice Suey, who they thought was going to play a lot this year, has been injured the entire year. He will be gone. Seth Towns, I don't think will ever play or come back. He's had back surgery. Right now, Johnson, the young redshirt freshman, whatever you call him, he's been injured. He took a blow to the mouth, I understand, and I don't know if he broke a jaw or had a bunch of dental work. He's missed the last 2 games. He'll be back, and Malik Branham will be back. Key will be back, and then you got incoming freshmen. So I would anticipate Ohio State not wanting to, but having to, will probably go into the transfer portal to see what's available and see what kids they might be able to get. The Brusk kid, the big kid Brunk that came from Indiana, he will be gone also. So I think they lose, counting walk-ons and scholarship players, they're going to lose 7 or 8 players off this team. And you only have 13 scholarship players. So it'll be a loss. It'll be different. So must have some other questions. I'm not trying to be a downer to you. I'm just telling you what's going on. Yeah, Don.
How much money do the players make that play in the G League?
Oh, not very much. I really don't know whether they can negotiate contracts. Don, question was about this G League that the pros have now. And it's guys that didn't even want to try college and probably couldn't even get in college, quite honestly, most of them. And so they go into it. It's like a minor league for professional basketball. And football is the very smart one. Their minor league are the colleges. And they have said that we're not going to take anybody till their junior year. And that's a great rule for pro football. It's, but how you can be one and done in basketball, but not one and done in football. If someone challenged that in court, I'd be surprised they wouldn't win in this day and age. But the NFL has said, well, we're worried about their health. So we're saying, they wouldn't be strong enough to play in this league until at least after their junior year or their junior class graduates from college. So they don't take young players. But knowing the business side of it, I think they think this is a wonderful minor league system. College football takes care of everything. They do all the coaching, they do all the weightlifting, they get them prepared, they play games, they get to evaluate all the kids. And, that way they don't have the expense of financing a minor league team. The minor league team is college. So,
They're the only major sport that doesn't have a minor league.
right, but they do.
Well, I understand that, but what would happen with all the commercialization you're talking about, NIL and players getting money? How about taking all the players out of the college campuses and put them in clubs?
Well, you
What
could.
they do in Europe and elsewhere.
Well, but if you put them in clubs, you do that, then you probably do away with TV revenue. And that's really what started all this. That's where the coaches' money is coming from. It's coming from shoe deals, from the Nikes and the Adidas and the Under Armours of the world. And those people are only providing that type of money because these teams are on television all the time and they can see what shoes the kids are wearing. So I had a teammate, Dave Sorensen, and he's since passed away, great guy at Ohio State. And he got a job with Converse shoes after he was out of college. And they had a guy playing for the Cavaliers named Campanella Russell, not Cassie, the one I played with in New York, but Campy Russell that played for the Cavs years ago. And Dave signed him up with Converse. And Dave's boss was in town, and they went to a Cavs game. And his boss, here came Campanella Russell, this prize rookie of the Cavs, and he comes out and he's got Converse on. And his boss said, "Good job, Dave. That's great. I'm glad we got him signed up." But they stayed too long. They stayed for the second half, and Campy Russell came out and had Adidas on the second. He signed 2 deals and changed his shoes at halftime. Dave said, "I about got fired." He missed the exclusive part in the deal that once you signed up, you could only wear, but he changed them. He signed 2 deals. So it's an amazing world we live in. So.
Any other questions
Yes.
for Bill?
Bill, how much is the mental health issue among college players in basketball?
The question was, how much of an issue is mental health among college basketball players?
Well, I think it's definitely there, like it is everywhere. And we just didn't recognize it before. And if you told Woody Hayes you had a mental health problem, I can't imagine what the answer would have been. But, and I'm not saying that was right, that was just the way it was, okay? And, but used to be, until this transfer portal rule was put in, that you could just decide I want to leave and put your name in the portal. You used to have to state a reason. And a lot of guys said it was psychological. But to verify that it was psychological, you had to meet sometime during the season with a psychologist. So anytime a kid was unhappy, he'd make an appointment with a psychologist and get it on his record, because that way he knew he could justify leaving. But I think mental health is an issue, and I don't know if we worry about that. We do worry about concussions and the concussion protocol right now. Ohio State does a great job of watching over their athletes health-wise and preparing them. The equipment is much better, but my goodness, the kids are bigger and faster than they've ever been. You watch some of the hits in football, and quite frankly, some of the hits in basketball where you don't have padding on, you don't have a helmet, and you can run into somebody of some pretty good size at a pretty good rate of speed and get thumped a little bit. Rex Kern spoke at our Rotary not too long ago, and Rex recently wrote a book, and he played freshman basketball when I was at Ohio State as a senior, and he was telling the group the story that he had to impersonate the visiting team, the scout team he was on as a freshman, and they had guards that liked to take the ball to the basket. And he said, I took the ball to the basket, and Bill Hosket hit me and split my lip and nearly broke my nose. And I told him, you should have left your helmet on. So, But he said he got hit a few times in basketball harder than he ever got hit in football, but he got hit in both, believe me. He had a lot of surgeries and a lot of issues, but you wouldn't change anything of all the things we went through. And I know from the age of the group I'm speaking to, a lot of you guys played high school athletics, and even when I was at Ohio State, we had the best medical people available. But during practice, they said no water. And as soon as practice was over, they gave you 2 big orange salt tablets and said, you got to have your salt. And this day and age, it's hydrate the players, give them all the water they want, and keep them away from salt. So we did a 180 from what is current today is the way, but it was the best knowledge we had at the time. So, but I think part of mental health problems at the collegiate level, not that they can't come from your background or wherever you're from, but it's from making freshmen eligible. I think we put a lot of pressure on kids right away. And we were removed from all that pressure because we couldn't play as freshmen. And a lot of these kids can't handle coming from high school and being all Mr. Everything and then having to adjust when you get to college. And that's a different type of mental health, that type of pressure. But there's definitely more things that they're aware of. It's like everything that goes on in grade school or high school today. They evaluate kids totally different than what we grew up with. My grandkids, they get evaluated on how they act on the playground, how they interact with other kids, and they keep charts on everything this day and age, where we just thought it was fun not to be in school for 15 minutes, you know. So it's all changed. So how about over here? Any questions back over here? Yes, sir.
What can we do to get the student back in student athletes?
I'm all for it. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I just think that we put so much emphasis on winning and corporate dollars and money and everything else that's going on in this day and age that I'm not saying it's win at all costs, but it's very difficult. And a coach can have an okay season and all of his kids do well academically, and he can still lose his job if he doesn't win. We just put too much pressure that direction. You know, it wasn't that long ago where if you played football at Ohio State, the goal was just to go to the Rose Bowl. And that was a phenomenal year if your team made it to the Rose Bowl. And Woody Hayes used to talk about it all the time. You know, that was the goal. This year we went to the Rose Bowl and it was just like, hey, you weren't in the Final Four. It's kind of disappointing. We had to go to the Rose Bowl. So our perspective just changes. You know, it's amazing that you can't be successful if you don't win the national championship. That's pretty sad commentary. But like I said, I came to school and Fred Taylor sat us down the very first day of practice. And he told us there's two things that are going to happen while you're at Ohio State. Number one, you're going to graduate. And number two, we're going to work toward winning. It wasn't we had to win. We're going to work toward it. And from 1960 to 1971, he won the Big Ten 7 times, was second twice, and went to 4 Final Fours. And left here bitter, a little bit bitter at the end because they didn't fully appreciate him. So it's bizarre. Yeah, he did both things right as far as we were concerned. He was graduating his kids and winning. But after the Minnesota incident where they had that riot up there, he kind of lost some of his spirit, and it was sad to see. And part of it was that the school and the league really didn't back him up. They didn't do anything to Minnesota. They were afraid to touch it, and it kind of broke his spirit and his interest in what he was doing. So, you know, I had a broadcast career beyond a playing career, and had a lot of fun events. It's nice to get in free, and all you do is chirp about what you saw in front of you. And worked with Tom Hamilton a lot, who was the Cleveland Indians play-by-play radio guy, great guy, fun to work with. And I can remember we did the Big Ten game of the week, and it was Indiana-Purdue over in Bloomington. And Knight had a tantrum very early in the game, and I did the game where he threw the chair. We had that game, and it was sad, but I was trying not to laugh at the same time because, you know, it's just Bobby being Bobby, and it was almost like it was planned. And he got tossed and thrown out. And just the way the Big Ten was at the time, the sports information director for the league ran up to our booth and said, "No replays." And I looked at him, I said, "What?" I said, "The man he got 3 technicals, he's been ejected. You got the athletic director out on the floor. he threw a chair that stopped about 6 feet from some people in wheelchairs that were on the first. I said, this is on CNN, ESPN. It's on everywhere right now. It's up on the satellite. Everybody knows what he just did. But they wanted to protect the league. So they didn't want us to show any replays. And of course, it was on the news all over the place afterwards. And I had Indiana, Wisconsin the next weekend. So I'm back over in Bloomington, and I'm walking around before the game, and Indiana, in all their wisdom, had chained all the chairs together. So, so instead of dealing with Bob Knight, we're not going to deal with the cause, we'll deal with the effect. They just chained all the chairs, so if he throws one, he's got to throw 25. So still makes me laugh to this day. I couldn't believe that's the way they handled it, but that was their management style. So, because he was not easy to deal with, believe me, to play for or to announce or to coach. But those were fun days when we were broadcasting games in the Big Ten, and you had Judd Heathcote at Michigan State and Gene Cady at Purdue and Bobby at Indiana. When you did one of those games, you knew something fun was going to happen because those guys were such characters. And you know, they were tough competitors, but they respected the game and they were fun to deal with. And now they don't seem to have as much fun as they used to. Let's put it that way. It's serious business all the way. It was serious with them when the game started, but it was pretty funny other than that. So I remember I taped an interview, and excuse my language, John, but I'm doing a taped interview with Judd Heathcote before a game one night. And I said, Judd, you guys struggled earlier, but you've won 4 of your last 5. And he said, well, we're going to win tonight. And they were playing Ohio State. And I said, you're pretty sure of that? And he said, oh, yeah. He said, Ohio State, they're shittier than we are. And I just looked at him. He said, probably going to have to do this again, aren't we? I said, yeah, I don't think that's going to go out on the air, Judd. So, but he was just the type of guy who was fun to be around with. So he was, and Izzo was his assistant at the time. So Tom learned from one of the very best, but really a competitive guy and a fun guy to be with. And we were talking about the golf club earlier today where Fred Taylor managed after he left Ohio State. And one of my favorite days was Fred invited me out to play golf at the golf club. And we played with Bob Knight and Judd Heathcote. Now, if you don't think that was a circus, I mean, those two in the summertime when they were relaxed, but it was a fun day. So,
Friends, I feel like you might all want to keep your seats for another hour. This was wonderful.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
Let's have a round of applause for Bill Hosket.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Keith, you're allowed to stand up now. I know you had hip surgery, so you're back there saying, I don't like to sit this long. So
Yeah.
you were kind to say, but Nadine had her arm on you. I know why you were sitting there. So
I also want to recognize Don Trotier one more time for his excellent organization of this event. And we were so pleased you did that. And thank you again, Bill, for being with us. Everyone
Thank you
have
all
a
for having
wonderful
me.
afternoon.
Thank you. Stay safe.